Welcome back to Kaulignation, your one-stop shop for all things Kaulig Racing, Dingernation, SVGNation, and all things NASCAR. That's Ryan. I'm Sean, and we have a metric shit ton to talk about tonight. Apologies for the technical difficulties off the start there. I don't know what happened. This program keeps changing, and by keep changing, I mean like there's been new updates almost every day for the last 3 weeks, and it's really hard to keep up with. I wish they'd just hold off on it, man. Do one big fucking update, then just learn the stuff from there. It's like that person when you're in the movie theater and they're fucking opening a piece of candy, but they're opening it as slowly and painfully as they can, thinking that they're doing us all a favor by going so slow, but they don't realize that you just need to rip the friggin' band-aid off. If you haven't yet, check us out on X at Kaulignation. We would appreciate it. We also have a bunch of Facebook groups: SVGNation, Dingernation, Kaulignation, Kaulig Racing. All of those are us. Big shout out to our channel sponsors: Lynn over at SVGNation on Facebook, Alex over at Dingernation. Ryan, we're in for a wild one tonight,
man. I am super excited. I first off want to thank everyone that might be joining us on X tonight for the first time. It's our first time venturing over to live streaming on X as well as YouTube. So I'm super excited. If anybody's hanging out over there, give us a shout out in the chat. Super excited to talk about some huge news in the world of Kaulig Racing. It's been as we anticipated, the last couple of weeks have been, it just feels like bombshell after bombshell after bombshell of big news. And after kind of a slow month and a half after the original announcement, it's here, and we're getting a lot of really important pieces of the puzzle finally starting to come together. I am very, very excited to get into it tonight and dig as deep as we can into what we have figured out over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, a lot of it has come to light recently. There's some twists and turns. Viking Motorsports posted want to give them some love here. Posted a preview of a driver announcement coming soon. And I got to tell you, man, I seen the shoes and immediately thought, oh, fuck, we all might be wrong on someone. Because I have a hunch we know who that driver is, but we'll get to that in a bit. My hunch, anyways, which could be wrong. Nothing like going off of a pair of shoes to try to distinguish something, because two people can't own the same pair of shoes. But yeah, we got a ton to get into today. First and foremost, we're going to start with Kaulig. a good chunk of this show is going to be about specifically Kaulig Racing and Ram and everything that's going on over there. We will touch on championship weekend a little bit later, the playoff system a little bit later, and what SVG's next step should be a little bit later on. Please feel free to leave a comment in the chat and share your thoughts there. If you want to support the channel, you can always send in a super chat, and we will interrupt whatever discussion we're having to answer whatever that super chat may or may not be. Chris Rice at it again, man. Goes on Sirius XM this morning. Probably says some things that maybe he shouldn't have said, and not necessarily in a bad way, because it's a good thing for us. But something, I don't know. Anytime this guy's on, this is why I think it's worth it to have Sirius XM, especially covering Kaulig. Is yes, we're able to get our own information, and we have a couple of sources close to the team that really help us out with that, and we thank them. But Chris says a lot in his interviews. Sometimes they seem like a nothing burger, but if you pick through them, there's usually something there. In fact, I remember Ryan thought there was a nothing burger of an interview about 2 or so months ago, and it about a week and a half later, the Ram deal was announced. So I had to go back and listen to that interview about 3 times to cherry pick out of it, and you usually can cherry pick out of Chris Rice interviews what's going on. I would argue, though, in this morning's interview on Sirius XM, there's no cherry picking needed, dude. He was pretty forthright about a lot.
Yeah, he was, and that's not usually his MO. I mean, listen, you and I have been doing this regarding Kaulig Racing for over 3 years, 4 years at this point, and we have listened to a lot of interviews. We have read a lot of tweets. We have, as you mentioned, we have our own contacts. We have a pretty good gauge of what's going on within the organization and the team. And one thing we know about Chris Rice is his brain moves faster than his mouth sometimes, and he'll start saying one thing and then he'll have a thought and he'll pivot a different direction, and usually that moment is when we get some good information because he's kind of cross-pollinating some things. But there's also times where he just says a lot of nothing and it's just filler. And going back to that interview from a couple of months ago, that's where my frustration was coming from. It's like he's saying a lot of words and not getting a lot of meaningful information to us. But in the end, it did have a lot of good, juicy stuff, especially about the Aura Motorsports shop and how they were folding in. I forgot the gentleman's name, but they were bringing him over from that organization to help kind of steer the direction of the add-ons to the new truck program. So there's definitely a lot of value in what he says. Today, though, and even last week, I would even go back to last week, he was about as clear and concise in his words as I've heard him in a long time. And listen, since they announced Ram, which goes back to Daytona, probably 10 weeks ago now, maybe more, they've had to really walk that fine rope between being, a Chevy team and saying, yeah, we're still Chevy and we're doing everything we can for our OEM, blah, 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 while also introducing in Ram. I feel like those shackles came off last week. Like they were much more, he in particular was much more comfortable talking about their relationship with Ram and the direction of the organization and where they were going. The contract with Chevy has clearly kind of been torn up and tossed in the garbage can. And it feels like they are now pretty much exclusively 100% Ram and Dodge focused, and they have very little constraints from Chevy. And I felt that today. Like you mentioned it in our chat. He said Dodge for the first time. He's kind of walked around that a little bit. He would say Ram and Stellantis, and specifically talking about the trucks. It just seemed like he was much more loose in his conversation, and he finally was able to, I think, share his true feelings about where the organization is going. Obviously, the amount of work they have to put in to get to where they want to be in Daytona come February. But he felt like the organization has truly taken I would say a leap forward with this arrangement with Ram. And I don't think anybody that is interested in the racing industry would disagree with that. Obviously, we're in the early days. There's still a lot of pieces that need to come together. But knowing the commitment that Dodge is clearly showing, that I expect Kaulig Racing to make significant strides over the next 12 months to become a pretty competitive racing organization. At least that's my hope, and I think it's theirs too.
So I have to get something off my chest. And to Nathan's comment here, Sean, have you heard anything about a Hall of Fame driver coming back to drive for Dodge? What's the current? And then he doesn't finish his point. I will say this: we are going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about it very soon. We are going to let you know, according to not just our sources, but sources around the industry, and we'll tell you who specifically. We'll tell you who our sources. That'll get us in a little bit of trouble. But we'll tell you other people that have mentioned the same thing within the last 24 to 48 hours. And we're going to talk about this topic right here for sure. So stay tuned for that. We're going to answer basically what's happening with the fourth Kaulig truck. And if you haven't figured out what's happening with the fifth Kaulig truck yet, you've been living under a little bit of a rock, and we will get to that too. But I need to get this off my chest. Look, there are certain things that irritate me, like when much bigger YouTube channels take information that we put out there and kind of spin it as their own and then do not give credit to where it came from. You know who you are. I reached out to you. If you're watching this, be better. You guys are really good at what you do. So source people properly, give credit where it's due, and we always do. And here's an example of that. If you don't follow Daily Down Fords, not Force, Daily Down Fords, the quote unquote parody account on X, you should. Yes, some of the stuff they put out there is absolutely fake. It's a parody account. But the amount of stuff that they've put out there over the last couple of months, I'd say that I've been closely paying attention, that they have in fact gotten right, is an incredibly high percentage. Now, yes, you have to sift through what is a parody tweet and what is a real tweet or post, whatever they call them these days. But make no mistake, those guys know what they're talking about more often than not. So credit to them. Let's dive into this, man. And the other thing, the other pet peeve. If people can stop referring to Dodge coming back to the Cup Series as when and if it's going to happen, that would be wonderful. There's no if about this. They are coming. It's guaranteed. It's not, well, if this goes right or that goes right. They're coming. There's a reason Kaulig did this deal. And come Cup Series time, I would imagine Kaulig won't be the only Dodge team. Who else remains to be seen? All right, now that I got that off my chest, let's dive into this ride. And there's some stuff to dive into here. Let me pull up my notes. Okay, so we put out a couple weeks ago that the RCR Alliance, based off of what we heard from our source and then what Chris Rice said in a follow-up interview, was over. Done. That was it. Dead in the water. And then someone else who, and it's not shade because I don't remember who put it out there. It's not someone super well known, but they've gotten some stuff right on X put out there that they had heard from team sources that the RCR Alliance would continue through 2026. I feel like we can emphatically say, dude, once and for all, the one welcome thing is done. It's dead. It's over. They have moved on. They're doing, Chris Rice's own words, they're doing everything on their own now. And yeah, there'll be some growing pains, but this is a move you need to make if you're turning to Dodge and RCR is not. And people, they can be on RCR campus and run a different manufacturer. They own the shops and they own the direct land the shops are on. Enough with that stuff. Ryan, your thoughts on the end of one welcome? We know some people might be sad about it, but we know quite a few people that have been, what is it, the Tarkin says to Vader, or maybe it's Vader says to Tarkin, this will be a day long remembered. There's a quite a big chunk of the fan base that's been waiting for this day for a long time.
For sure, for sure. And I have no doubt that, when we first, shared that nugget of news a couple weeks ago, that with the information sent back was probably correct, that Kaulig Racing had a contract with RCR through 2026 as a support program. That was written before they came to an agreement with Dodge and Ram, right? And it was no ifs, ands, or buts that once that agreement came into place, that while they probably could have worked through some agreements and made some concessions to be a one welcome Chevy Cup program while also simultaneously being a Ram Stellantis Dodge truck program, um, it was pretty clear from day one. I mean, I'm going all the way back to the day they sat in Daniel Dye's father's Dodge dealership, right? And they're like, we need to work through these different arrangements and these deals. And at the time of that announcement, Chris Rice, this is where Chris Rice kind of speaks out of both sides of his mouth. Hey, we're within days. So his interviews are on Wednesday. He said by Friday we'll have an agreement with Ty Dillon, and we're far along into this process. This following Saturday, they announced they're going to Dodge. Here we are 3 months later, that deal has not come to fruition, and there's still some doubt if it will. And I think a lot of that comes to the simple fact that once they made that decision to go Ram, that the one welcome arrangement was falling apart. That it was clear that they had upset, even if they had already communicated that they were doing this with Chevy. And honestly, Richard Childress, it was clear that they had upset that relationship. And while they could have potentially found an agreement, they have not. And that RCR arrangement has come to an end. Matt Kaulig, Chris Rice hasn't said a word about it in months. And truthfully, based off what we heard today, they are no longer in any way working together. Like that contract, they either bought it out, or there was an out clause, or simply put, RCR decided that they didn't want to honor it any further, which could have been a possibility as well. End of the day, that situation's done and dusted. Colleagues on their own. They said they're going to have to do their own wind tunnel testing. They're going to have to fabricate their own bodies. They are going to have to do their own simulations, things that they relied very heavily on from RCR in the past. Clear as a bell that they are now on their own to do. That relationship has come to an end. It doesn't need to be worried about. Solely focused forward on this situation with their agreement with Ram and Dodge. And I think we will see dividends paid off very quickly in that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, and to be clear, what we're kind of poking a little bit of fun at Chris. We both love Chris Rice. Dude has an infectious personality, and I know he can be a bit much for some people, but you look at what he's done with his personal health journey and how inspiring he can be, and obviously he's now the CEO over there. Definitely not throwing shade at him by any means, just having a little bit of fun because he does tend to slip when he gets speaking. Speaking of which, he will be on Sirius XM next Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern for, is it 9 or 8? I think it's 9, they said. But he'll be on that morning for an entire hour. So there's obviously a reason that's going to happen. And we believe that reason will be announced sometime in the next 48 hours. And that will be the Ram Truck Show, which we don't really have any information on where it's going to air. I like your theory that it might just go up on the NASCAR channel I think it's on Roku and Tubi and some other places. Um, I still think, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of something with Amazon, but they typically like to produce their stuff quite a bit. And I don't think there's time for that. I think whatever this thing's going to be is going to be pretty raw because not only is it going to film quickly, it's going to air pretty quickly too. So um, you're going to get an announcement about the show, and I do believe the show is going to be airing within a couple of weeks of the announcement at most, which is pretty wild when you think about the turnaround time. I know someone mentioned that they thought Dana White is hosting, and I can't tell you that he isn't. But the role that we were told Dana White meaning UFC TKO guy, the role we were told he was playing was producing, so which would make sense. And we were told that a long time ago, to a point where this thing went from it's happening to oh maybe it's not happening to it's definitely happening. It's definitely happening to a point where filming is already taking place as we speak. So, and then names involved. I hesitate to give more than one man, but the one we know for sure is Landon Huffman. Landon Huffman is involved, and I know there's a guy on Twitter who's been lobbying hard basically every day for the last 3 months for Landon Huffman to get one of these trucks. I wish I knew the other names involved. The simple truth is I just don't know a lot of the names down in those lower series, but that's one name that did stand out. And we do believe he's involved in the series. So, yeah, that Ram Truck Show announcement, I'd be pretty surprised if you don't get it tomorrow. There's a chance they hold off till Friday. Friday can be a news dump day, but this doesn't feel like a news dump situation. This feels like a get it out Thursday and then answer questions about it Friday. Um, so that's, certainly possible. Any thoughts on the Ram show, man?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think you've pretty much nailed it right on the head here. What we know for sure is that it's currently filming or started this week. That's Landon Hoffman for sure is the one name and probably the biggest name, at least in our realm of potential drivers. Um, I followed Matt Weaver. He's a great local short track source. Obviously, he does NASCAR as well. But he covers the short track scene better than just about anybody. And he made the comment last night that several notable short track drivers that you would expect to see at some of these upcoming winter fall race bashes are not participating this year. And Landon Hoffman's one of them. And again, I don't want to say too much, but I believe Brandon Pollard Bubba Pollard is possibly one of them as well, who's
I
also
think
another big name.
one of the Harvick guys might be one of them too. I
Yeah,
can't remember the fellow's name though.
yeah, so there's definitely quite a few late model names and you're right. I'm in the same boat. As much as I love kind of tracking what's happening down in the lower series, I watch the clips. All I know is Keelan Harvick's out there kicking ass on the Cars tour. Dale Jr. shows up every once in a blue moon and gets his rear end kicked by the youngins. So I don't know the names very well down in that Cars tour, late model, super late model series, which is where it appears they're pulling from a talent pool wise for this show. But I will say this: I know we were really concerned that this show was going to be kind of a gimmick, a kind of I'm just going to throw it. Tony Breidinger is going to be on the show, right? Like somebody that the fifth car would go to a driver that maybe wasn't quite quality enough to be in it. I don't have that concern anymore. I legitimately think that a lot of these guys that they have tapped to do this, while I'm not going to expect, out of the box top 5 winning results, they have talent. At the super late model series, these guys are good. They're very good, in fact, and they should adjust to the truck series pretty well. And I will say also, I do think the NASCAR production is going to be a big part of how the show is being filmed and recorded. NASCAR, they've taken a lot of crap the last couple months, but they put hundreds of millions of dollars into this production studio in Charlotte. They produce some really good social media content. Their videos are top notch. I'm guessing that's where this show's being recorded through. Maybe that gets sold out to an Amazon or maybe even an HBO Max because they have some TNT coverage as well. But I think we're going to get a good quality show, even if it is not well edited leading into it. And I have no doubt that we're going to know within the next month to 6 weeks who's going to be in that car. At least that's what we've been told.
Yeah, Ty Norris and Chris Rice seem to have different things to say on that front, but if you're going off of Chris's interview, he suggested we would know who the last 2 trucks are by the end of this month. which means it's going to be, I don't know, it can't be a very long series. Like, I'm thinking 3 to 6 episodes.
Probably. And I'm
Uh,
thinking six
uh,
to eight drivers tops.
yeah, that's what we heard, 6 to 8 drivers. So it's not going to be like this big, 30, 40 people thing, and then they eliminate it down to a select few. There's also a bunch of NDAs in place. On my other YouTube side of things that I do that Ryan pops over on sometimes. We deal with a lot of Hollywood industry stuff, and NDAs are a very common thing. They're broken all the time. Just ask Adam Driver. But oh, still got me?
You're still
Okay, I
here.
thought you
Yep.
lost me there for a second. Okay. Um, but yeah, so there's a bunch of people that can't talk about this. Um, and I understand. Like you don't want to get in crap. And like I said, I think Mr. CEO might have said more than he should have said. So that answers one of the two remaining trucks. Is it's going to go to either one or two people on the show. We don't know the details yet. Is there going to be two winners and they split the truck? Is there going to be one winner? We don't know. Those details haven't come out yet. I would hope they would come out when they make the show announcement here in the next 48 hours, we believe. So stay tuned for that. Also, it's taking place at South Boston Speedway, so pretty big Chris Rice connection there. Family, at least operated. I don't know about owned, but definitely operated by the Rice family. So yeah, I you might be asking yourself what happens with the other truck. Well, that involves just a massive domino effect of things. And to properly follow this, you got to go all the way back to when we said we heard Christian Eckes was going to be in a Ram truck. And we did hear that. And we were not the only people that heard that. Freddie Kraft mentioned it as well. And then something changed in like, we're not talking in like the last month, we're talking like the last 2.5, 3 weeks to where Eckes is not in one of those trucks. I know there's going to be people that say, well, Eckes has been locked. Eckes is rumored right now to be returned to Bill McNally. Although there might be a pretty big asterisk to that, which we'll get to. Um, but someone might say that that's been in the works for a long time. But no, as far as we know, upwards of 3 weeks ago, he was destined for one of the Ram trucks. And then all of a sudden, Justin Haley, who they didn't think they had room for, is in one of the trucks. Great addition, by the way. I think he'd be a great vet for that team. Um, but it begs the question, what happens to Christian Eckes? So file that one in your back pocket because we are going to come back to that. But the simple answer is no, it will not be Christian Eckes in that other truck, apparently. Now, I always leave wiggle room for maybe we're wrong. Maybe we don't have this right. Daniel Hemrick's name was out there. Grant Enfinger's name was out there. And it turns out, though, man, we were told last night, it was hinted at to me the night before, but pretty outright told last night that the truck was going to be an all-star truck, which was like, okay, well, how the hell's that going to work? Because we've been operating under the opinion that drivers who were in one of the other three manufacturers can't drive the Rams. Now, we don't know that for certain. There could be exceptions. Um, but what we were told is there were going to be some retired NASCAR drivers in that truck, and some of them have pretty big names. And I will not sit here and lead you on and say that we've been told a single name. We have not, other than retired NASCAR drivers coming out of retirement for select events in a fourth truck. Um, and I think there's some names you can begin to go over. I know Jimmy Johnson teased the truck thing the other day. I don't think he would be allowed to run it because of his ties with Toyota. And like, why not just run a Tricon truck? So I think the timing there was rather interesting. But the names that I will say make a lot of sense to me especially given their Dodge connection, dude. Is Ryan Newman makes sense? Casey Kane makes sense? And yes, even Tony Stewart makes sense because NHRA does not race every single weekend. And there's no reason he couldn't do a quick one off. And he is as heavily tied to Dodge and Mopar as any motorsport driver on the planet right now. So that one makes some sense, although I understand some people in our chat don't want to see it. And then the other names I'll throw out there, like Clint Boyer, Kevin Harvick. I think all those guys are on the table. Greg Biffle, Matt Kenseth, maybe. Like, think of some big time names that would attract some media attention and wouldn't be tied down to manufacturer deals to where they couldn't drive. Your thoughts on the likelihood of this and the direction?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of surprising to me. I guess, I had my, head pretty solidly wrapped around a core set of drivers from the existing series, or obviously the Kaulig Xfinity program, now shuttered, coming down and taking those seats. Obviously, some of that's come to fruition with Daniel Dye, Brendan Queen, and Christian Eckes, who we thought is no longer the case. Um, so obviously we just kind of heard this for the first time in the last couple of days, but it makes a lot of sense. It really does. Especially drivers like Casey Kane and Ryan Newman, who have distinct Dodge connections from their days in the past. Casey Kane in particular, he was one of the original Evernham drivers, I believe. He would make, from a branding perspective, it would be full circle situation for him. And listen, this is the one thing Dodge, and Chris has said this pretty clearly for a while, that Dodge is here to brand. This is they're coming out swinging, and they want people to be very in tune to what's happening. And listen, Dodge has always gone big. Their commercials are out of this world compared to Chevy and Ford, and with fire and pyro and cars jumping over other cars. This is just how they kind of operate. And they want to come in out of the gates full tilt. And nothing says that than bringing in a literal former NASCAR champion, or multi-time winner, big names. Tony Stewart makes a lot of sense. As you said, he's basically doing over at the NHRA level what Kaulig is about to do at the Cup NASCAR level. Like, he is pretty much their sole single source team. He runs multiple cars and multiple series. Like, this is how Dodge operates. They find a sole source and they push it hard. Tony Stewart, while we don't know, we're just kind of speculating on that specific name, would make a lot of sense. And we did hear former champion potentially in line for this, so that would make a lot of sense. I fully expect Dodge, from a promotional standpoint, even going back to the TV show, all of this is for Dodge to make a huge splash. They're going to have commercials all over the offseason. They're going to have commercials once the season starts next year. They're coming in with a huge investment to make themselves known and make sure people know that they're here to play. So that is fully my expectation, is we're going to see a multitude of drivers running, races for this the fifth truck, I guess you can call it the fifth truck. And all of them being significant names that the sport has kind of adopted. Greg Biffle, I fully expect Greg Biffle to run a couple races, because he, I don't know if he raced this year specifically, but I know for sure he raced multiple Cup races for New York Racing last year. So we know Greg Biffle still has the itch. I fully expect to see him in a truck.
Nathan says, Sean, Tiki's Garage was saying morning one of the drivers is going to be, he means this morning, one of the drivers is going to be an owner of a team. So this is going to come across incredibly ignorant, and it's not meant to be. I have absolutely no idea what TK's Garage is. Maybe I should. I don't. So apologies on that front. If you think they're reputable, then I think you can read into it. Then I think if people prove they have a track record of getting things right, then yeah, like Ryan and I like to think we've gotten way more right, especially on the Kaulig front than we've gotten wrong, which has led to the growth of our channel and our social media accounts. But I'll tell you what, just what Nathan's saying here, man, has Tony Stewart written all over it.
Yeah, it does. And sorry, I just did a quick search because I got a couple windows open here on my screen. And TK's Garage is a YouTube channel that's pretty clearly Dodge, or definitely vehicle centric, maybe even specifically Dodge. It has 207,000 followers, so they're pretty big, I would say. And in fact, the video from yesterday says the Stellantis seed, blah, blah, blah. Basically the CEO of Stellantis is in their most recent video. So I'm guessing that's something we can touch base on in our next video and go back and see what that has to say. But yeah, Tony Stewart would, I mean, if you want a guy, Daytona, and he loves Daytona, right? He's got, double-digit wins at Daytona in his career, running various vehicles. There's no real bigger splash than getting a 3-time champion at the highest level of NASCAR to come in and drive one of your trucks. And listen, excuse me, I think you hit a really good point. Like, yes, Justin Haley's been around quite a few years at this point, even though he's still only 26. He's got a lot of NASCAR experience. I feel like you bring in a guy like Tony Stewart or Greg Biffle or any of these big names potentially rumored to be in the seat. That is a level of experience and caliber that can really rub off not just on your drivers, but on your team and organization, all the way down to your crew guys, your shop guys, just having that wisdom, that experience that you can ask some questions and say, hey, what does it take to get this done? I think it makes a lot of sense to bring in a veteran of that caliber to really help, because again, they are doing this from the ground up. Yes, they have an existing infrastructure and they have a good baseline. They obviously are carrying over, I don't know the pure number of Xfinity employees. It's a decent chunk, right? Like Kaulig isn't just starting from scratch here. But when it comes down to it, they can really lean on some of these names to kind of just help build that foundation, that notebook, and say, this is how you need to, this is the direction you guys need to go to get better and better and better. So baseline, I would be beyond thrilled at any of those names, but Tony Stewart would be a grand slam.
Here's what we're gonna do, just because I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat, and there's like 100 people watching over on Twitter, X, sorry, whatever it's called these days. I'll get the hang of it one day. If you have any questions or comments, this is our first time we've ever been live on X, not the live show. This is actually episode 8 of Ram and Racing, and probably like our 200th video on the YouTube channel or whatever. At the end of the show, and we don't know when that'll be yet, we'll answer as many questions as you guys want to send. But if you're watching on X, please find the stream over on YouTube and put the questions there. You can on X if you want, but chances are we'll have a lot better chance at seeing them on X because it doesn't appear the software filters through X numbers, unfortunately. So any questions at all, put them in the chat and we will answer them, or even comments. And again, if you want to donate to the channel, you can do that by sending in a super chat. So there's a pretty, so just to specify here, we have a big sort, I wouldn't say it's a bombshell, and it's not us dropping it because Chris kind of dropped it today, which is what the title of the video is about. But before we get that, so to reiterate, we do not know if the Ram show, Gong show, whatever you're gonna call it, is going to have one winner or two. But we can state pretty emphatically it is only going to affect one truck, because the other truck is going to be the All-Star truck. And by the way, I didn't say the other people that put this out there, man, but one of the other big names that put this out there in the last 24, 48 hours was Freddie Kraft. He said the other truck was going to be an All-Star truck as well. So, Freddie is usually right, and he's been right a whole lot on this Ram stuff. So, between what we're saying and what he's saying, I think there's enough smoke there to think, yeah, the All-Star truck's probably a go for sure. And then again, we don't know TK's garage, but if they have a track record, then there's a really strong chance. Like there's just too much smoke for there to not be fire. Um, the big thing that came out of the interview this morning, and I've since heard from one of our sources. Actually, I won't lie, he messaged me about 15 minutes ago as we're on air. Is Chris Rice said that, and Ryan, correct me because you've listened to the interview a couple of times as well. During that interview this morning, he said, and I quote, "Not only is Ram supporting us on the truck side, they're supporting us on the cup side as well." And first of all, is that the appropriate quote?
I don't think that's the exact quote. He said it so casually, like it was just a secondary thought. He's like, yeah, and we're getting support from Dodge for the Cup program. Like it's mind blowing how it just kind of came out, and he didn't elaborate. And we've had this discussion how Pete Pistone and Mike Bagley didn't just drop their jaws and pivot back around and follow up with something based off that statement blows my mind. I don't know how you can hear that and just kind of brush it off, but they did. But yeah, that's the quote. Yeah, Dodge is going to support our Cup program.
Yeah. So, and one of our sources just reached back out to us and said that is what they believe is happening. They believe that they have basically cut a deal that Ram, Dodge, Stellantis, however you want to put it, is going to help them fund their Cup operation until there's a Dodge on track in 2027 or 2028. So, does that mean sponsorship? Does that just mean a check? I don't know. So I'm hesitant about what sponsors might be able to appear on some Ghost Chevy cars, which is essentially what they'll be. But just remember, Daniel Dye has had B Pro Auto, which is a Ram subsidiary, on his car probably a half a dozen times in total the last 2 years, and no one ever even really noticed it or knew what B Pro Auto was. Never heard a single soul on Twitter mention what it was. And then we did some research when we heard it was going to be announced at his dad's Ram dealership, and sure enough, B Pro Auto came up, and it's like, oh, well, there's a connection. So they also made reference to they're going to be rewrapping the Cup trailers,
yep,
as well, not just for the trucks, but for the Cup Series as well, which is a sign of new sponsors. So be on the lookout for that. But again, the big thing here, man, is, and again, it's not going to get played because half the people that cover NASCAR, actually 90% of people that cover NASCAR don't take Kaulig seriously. They're just starting to with the Ram announcement now. All your big guys usually don't cover too much Kaulig. I cannot overstate how massive of a deal it is if Ram and Stellantis and company were just like, you know what? We know you're going to be in our Dodges in 2027 or 2028. We also don't want to see you fall on your face, though. We're going to help do the Cup thing, too. Like that's a game changer. That alone would have been the end of the one welcome relationship.
Yeah, without a doubt. And one thing I want to just kind of even just to add on to this even further is when they made the initial announcement, they said we signed a long-term commitment with Ram. And we found out later from Ty Norris that long-term commitment was 10 years. 10 years in NASCAR is an eternity. We've seen a dozen organizations come and go in a 10-year span, right? That is a huge commitment from Ram, specifically for the trucks. But Chris today, and maybe I'm reading a bit too much into this, but he said they just signed a long-term contract with Dodge. To me, this is the initial contract was for Ram, and I do believe that they just signed a commitment long-term for Dodge to be their primary manufacturer tier 1 support leading into the Cup Series going forward. That's how I gathered that bit of information from Chris Rice today. And to me, that is the sole indication that they are, as we already knew, I think they probably had to wait till the year was over when the Chevy contract was either expiring or they could buy their way out of it. Who knows the exact method, but I feel like this is the pivotal point in which Ram is going to start supplementing Kaulig's budget, knowing that they aren't going to get any Chevy support. I thought, this is just how I figured this was going to play out, it would be done a little bit more in the shadows, right? Like I just kind of assumed that they would get some support. And I didn't say this at all to you prior to right this second, but I just kind of had this assumption that Ram would support Kaulig in their Cup endeavors, knowing that they were going to lose the Chevy contract. I just kind of figured they would bake it into the amount of money that they paid them for the Ram trucks. Like, okay, 5 trucks, 10 years, divide, to the second decimal point, divide by 2. Okay, we got you at $100 million or whatever the number is. I just kind of figured they'd bake that price in there. But it seems to me that they have now kind of just been overtly forward saying, we are a Dodge program. We're going to be a Dodge program in Cup. We're going to be a Dodge program in Xfinity. And we're going to be a Dodge program in trucks. And I don't know what the wrapping on the Cup Series is going to be. It could be Pro Auto. It could be some sort of, the direct connect. But if at this point, if the Chevy contract is done, if the one welcome contract is done, and there's no red tape, I see no reason that Dodge can't plaster their decals on the side of a Kaulig Cup car, even if it is a Chevy going forward. And I kind of expect that to be the case.
Yeah, the only example I can think of that, and if there's any drag racing nuts in here, I'm about to pull out a name from the past, is excuse me, Larry Morgan, longtime Pro Stock driver. He used to drive this old purple Oldsmobile. Put on the car, it had the Mopar logo. So that's the only example I can really think of that happening, other than Daniel Dye here recently. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But like, this is a big deal. This is a incredibly big deal because this is a team that now has to do everything itself. We we believe the way it's going down, judging by the interview, is the trucks will be where the Xfinity cars used to be. The Cup cars will remain where the Cup cars are. And what was the Our Motorsports shop is likely their new fab shop, which they've never had one of them before. So a lot of change happening over there. It's a big deal. For their sake, I really hope that what I assume will be the Dodge Charger Daytona that they use is ready for 2027. I think it'd be best for all parties if it were. But at least if it's not ready until 2028, you already have funding coming in from Ram, Dodge, Stellantis. You're not just being dropped out in the middle of the ocean with a life jacket and saying good luck, right? Like, I think that's a big deal. And again, some of this is speculative and reading in between the lines, but at the end of the day, the main source of this particular topic comes straight from the CEO's mouth. So, big deal if you ask me, man.
I think this is the most important piece to the puzzle in terms of what to expect performance wise. Like, I don't think, none of us are naive enough to think that even if Dodge says, you know what, you are a tier 1 manufacturer team starting 2026, that's next year, even though they're driving Chevys. Like, even if Dodge starts providing that level of support, I'm not naive enough to think that that's going to immediately overnight boost their performance into something other than what Kaulig Racing has been over the last 5 years. That said, it gives me the confidence that they're not going to completely fall off a cliff either. right? They still have to do their own wind tunnels, right? That's one of the things they talked about today. They're going to have to do their own simulation because they're no longer getting sim time with Chevy. As Chris mentioned last week, they're not building one, but they're building two simulators where I'm not sure, but they're building them, right? They're going to be doing their own fab work, as you just mentioned. They're going to be doing a lot of their own heavy lifting, and with that is going to come struggle. I think the best example of that would be looking over at Legacy Motor Club and them making the switch from Chevy to Toyota. In that first year, yes, they were a tier 1 program, but they weren't associated with JGR. It was not pretty, right? They were finishing in the 30s pretty much week in and week out. But this year, they made a big step forward because they built out their own notebook. They had their own, I'm guessing they did their own thing. They were able to get on their own footing, and they made huge gaps or huge improvements. That is my expectation with where Kaulig is. We know, and this is not, even though AJ Allmendinger had a horrid end to his season, what do you say, finished 28th in points. That was not indicative of how well that car ran last year or this most recent season. He was fastest in practice at Martinsville, was leading at Talladega before getting wrecked, had seriously won the pole for the Bristol night race, finished top 5 at Darlington, right. Finished top 5 at Darlington in the first playoff race, finished 3rd at Charlotte, right. They were inconsistent. That's Kaulig's MO. But that car, week in and week out, had speed. They didn't finish the races. They didn't put together complete races. They made mistakes. It cost them dearly, if what felt like every single week the last quarter of the season. But there was speed in that car. And I fully expect that to continue into next season. It might not be pretty. I expect to struggle. But I fully also expect AJ Allmendinger and that 16 team to not roll over and die. I really feel like as long as Dodge is providing some baseline support, they will be as competitive next year as they were this year.
I think having the right people in place goes a long way. Like, I think we've seen the positive effect of bringing in a guy like Mike Cook had. Again, the results the last third of the season were pretty terrible. If you're just looking at where they finished and not where they ran. But there were some pretty big strides made this year. And I think if you can get more people, not necessarily just in the engineering department, but like just in the team in general, that alter the vibe a little bit and want to push things forward, I think that can be a good thing for the organization. They're going to be in tough, though. You're right. Like, you're going from doing some of the stuff on your own to everything on your own. So growing pains are to be expected. I would assume, given that they're so close to RCR, and Chris said that they left on good notice and mentioned that I forget the guy's name. His last name's Lawrence. He's a bigwig at maybe Danny Lawrence. I can't remember. Bigwig at RCR said that they'll always have a home there, and more proof to the pudding that they're done with that relationship for now. But I would assume they're still going to lease ECR engines, much as I would love to see Hendrick engines getting under the hood for a year or two. I don't think that's likely. But time will certainly tell. Let's talk about the other domino potentially in this, though, man. And that is, we talked about the All-Star truck. Well, that's a truck. We talked about the Ram show. That's a truck. By the way, one last reminder, if you want any questions or comments in between now and the end of the show, now is the time to do so. We're going to have some rapid-fire topics to get to momentarily, but we'll go back through the chat and answer what we can before we get off. So that essentially has all the trucks accounted for. Yet there's Christian Eckes. What happens with him? I honestly don't know. I've been very vocal about, if you just let this guy walk out the door, I think it's a massive loss for the organization in terms of the talent pool. It feels pretty unforgivable to me, but I would like you to walk the audience through. I don't want to call it a coping mechanism because I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense, but why this might have happened and what would be okay conditions to lose Christian Eckes to, even though I'm adamant that we should not. It's certainly a possibility.
It is a possibility without question. And I want to preface this by saying it would be a massive loss for the organization if Christian Eckes is no longer part of the organization after this season. I have no doubt that the organization would be worse off tomorrow than they were last Saturday when he was driving the 16 Xfinity car. That said, I think in the event that when the Xfinity program shuttered, they closed their doors, he had a contract to drive the 16 Xfinity car for X amount of years. We believe he even signed an extension at some point based off what Chris Rice mentioned not too terribly long ago. But once the doors closed for the Xfinity program, similar to the one welcome arrangement, I kind of get a feeling that the contract tore up, no longer null and void. We have no program for you. You are a free agent. And the expectation was he would either A, join the Ram truck program with an opportunity to go cup racing in 2027, or B, potentially get a cup opportunity in the event that Ty Dillon, while they were working on a contract extension, as we sit here at 10:40 at night on the East Coast on November 5th, still hasn't signed a contract with Kaulig to race in the cup program, he would be the likely successor to that ride. For me, if they had to lose Christian Eckes because the contract had to get torn up, there's no Xfinity program, at the expense of adding Dodge, Ram, Stellantis as your tier one manufacturer support, you're building 5 trucks for the future. You're building potentially 2 or more cup cars. Because I mean, we don't need to touch on this tonight, but I think there's a real possibility that with all the charter influx situation going on, that Dodge Ram would want Kaulig to expand to a 3rd program. I think that's an open door, right? I think there's just that there were options with Dodge that no organization that isn't stabilized as a tier 1 program elsewhere would be dumb to turn away. The support, the funding, the 10-year contract, those trucks, every single one of those trucks are funded for 10 years. That is amazing. They can add outside support if they wanted to, and they probably will. But the fact of the matter is, there's enough money in the bank account to cover those trucks thanks to Dodge Ram Stellantis. It sounds like Dodge Ram Stellantis is about to put a lot of money in the Cup bank account to make sure that program is solvent going forward. I would hate to lose Christian Eckes. But when you say, do you want Christian Eckes driving your Kaulig Xfinity program as a 5th-tier Chevy team with a meddling one welcome relationship, or do you want a fully supported tier 1 manufacturer in Dodge providing you insane amounts of support? You're going to be a primary going forward in their cup program. You have 5 trucks that they are fully funding. You weigh the balance here and say, you got to scramble some eggs sometimes to move forward. And it, to me, it's not even a question. You take the Dodge deal and you move forward. And that's just where I sit on this. Yes, Christian Eckes is, I think, very close to being cup ready, if not there already. His maturity is so high and he's so calm and collected behind the wheel. I would hate that. Now, that said, circling back real quick to the Ty Dillon situation, we know for sure that Ty Dillon has, at a minimum, partial funding for next season, but not full funding for next season. If he had full funding for next season, he would already be signed. I promise you that. He is not. So what does that mean? Does that mean that Dodge is going to write a check to fill in the blanks for Ty Dillon to run a full season? Or is Dodge willing to write a check to have Christian Eckes come run a partial cup schedule? Ty Dillon is going to fund 2/3 of the season. Let's say he funds 24 races. Dodge is willing to foot the bill to put Christian Eckes in the car for 12. I think that's a real possibility. And knowing that you can't, and we don't believe, even though we were just saying there could be sponsorship situations, I do not think we're going to see anybody driving at the Cup program for Kaulig driving a Ram truck. I just don't see that situation working out. So if you have Christian Eckes potentially running a partial Cup schedule next season, that makes him likely ineligible to run a Ram truck, which then would lead credence to what we've heard, that he has signed a full season to run trucks for Bill McAnally, who is a Chevy program. Maybe it's a bit of a coping mechanism on my part, but I think there's a real pathway to Christian Eckes potentially running a partial Cup schedule in 2026 with the realistic opportunities for him to be the full-time Cup driver in 2027. As much as I like Brandon Queen, Butterbean is an amazing talent. He is still raw. He is quite a few years away. Christian Eckes could slide into that car and struggle, but I think he could be the guy that you set forward and say, all right, we're going to build around Christian Eckes today. We're going to build around Butterbean in 2029 when AJ retires. And that's the plan. But I think a lot of things do have to fall into place to make that happen.
Yeah, I wish we could sit here for certain and say that Christian Eckes is destined for the Cup ride. It's something we heard is possible, not guaranteed, maybe not even likely, because there's a lot of people having a hard time making sense of just like a clean break there. But that being said, on the Ty Dillon front, because we've gotten this one a couple times today, I believe, no, he hasn't re-signed yet. Yes, it was mentioned months ago that it would be, maybe next week, maybe the following week. And then like a couple months later, which would then be like a month ago, yeah, no, it's close. And then nothing has materialized. That doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. But we'll give you this one. And this is to the people that are assuming Kaulig's going to sell charters too. And I get where there's some logic there, because theoretically they could, sell a charter, and then NASCAR grants, or sells rather, Ram and Kaulig 2 more charters in a year or two, because they have them in reserve. That being said, we can, and this isn't speculative, this is guaranteed, we can report that 10 car has certain sponsorship for next year. Can't say who, sworn to secrecy, but has sponsorship next year for, we'll call it a handful of races. It's not like half a season or not even a third of a season, but it's also not just a couple of races. And that deal was signed without a guarantee of who would be in the car. And that says something, because that's a little different than the year before.
Yeah, it sure does. I think, when we look at Ty Dillon and the deal that he put together, and listen, I to his sponsors, I know the year didn't end well for him, but if we circle back to the midpoint of the season, you and I were both pretty impressed with where Ty Dillon was at and what he was able to accomplish in the 10 car. And, he was running pretty, I forgot how to speak here, but he was consistently running around 20th, 25th, which is where we were hoping he would run. And he was doing some pretty good work with his sponsors, Seabest, Nicotine, Grizzly, nicotine pouches, and a couple other one-offs like DraftKings came on board, which is mind-blowing that they were able to pull that off. And even Aflac was on the car last week, as a sub-sponsor. Like, Ty Dillon is a marketable dude, and they were able to piece together a full season of sponsorship. It's clear that some of that sponsorship is pulled back a little, and that they don't have a full sponsor quota filled for him. That doesn't mean he won't get his opportunities. I think when you look at the free agent pool, there wasn't a lot to work with this year. that it makes a lot of sense that Ty Dillon is still going to have his opportunity in a Cup car with Kaulig. But it's the door has been opened because there isn't quite as much sponsorship on that car next year. So, what that looks like going forward, I don't know. But we do know that he does have a partial season filled. And if that means he race with Kaulig, or as you were kind of alluding to, if they decide to go in a different direction, that sponsorship isn't necessarily tied to Ty Dillon. Initially we were like, maybe it's the Richard Childress connection, and some of the sponsorship was agreed upon because of those relationships. Not so much this year, even though there isn't as much of it. It is specifically to Kaulig and not Ty Dillon. So while I still think, and based off of who we've spoken to, Ty Dillon is the runaway favorite to be in that car next year, it's not a guarantee. And the sponsorship that has been signed for Kaulig Racing is, in fact, for Kaulig Racing as an organization, and that would go to whoever is in that seat.
Yeah, I don't know how that one's going to play out. I expect Ty Dillon to do at least some of the races, but I don't know about all of them. And it also makes me wonder if Ty, I'm sure he would love to be Cup racing, but might be a possibility with the new Richard Childress Alliance teams. So wouldn't rule that one out necessarily. But it's interesting for sure because it's another big domino, and I quite like Ty. I thought the first third of the season, those first 12 to 14 races went as well as that team could have possibly hoped. And unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, what followed was not. So yeah, we'll see what happens on the 10, but it's no guarantee that Ty Dillon is back for a full season. Technically, it's no guarantee that Ty Dillon is back at all, and it makes you wonder with the end of the RCR relationship, like they're not going to be going in and out of each other's buildings at will anymore. If that plays a part in it, because we know Ty's been taking on more responsibility behind the scenes at RCR. Like he was just doing it at the NASCAR award show too. He was essentially the spokes
The
guy
proxy,
for
the
RCR.
proxy owner
Yeah,
of RCR. Yeah.
wasn't Austin, it was Ty, which is
That
the
part
second time
surprised
we've
me.
heard that, by the way.
Yeah.
That's the second time though we've heard that Ty is the one going to business meetings and stuff with Richard. So I don't know if that's more like in his background, in his DNA. I don't know. I've never spoken to him. So, but we will watch with great interest which direction all. Let's. I think we have a couple more Kaulig things to touch on before we do some rapid fire and then answer these questions. Let me just pull up my notes here. They sold about 20 of their Xfinity cars to a team that will be aligned with RCR. I know there's some people that have suggested a expansion for
Big
who's
Machine
the team
Racing.
Sanchez drives for? That Kligerman, yes.
Yeah, Big Machine.
I don't think that fits with what Chris Rice was describing personally. Sounded like it would be a new team and that they would make their own announcement. And it sounded like he already said too much before he caught himself in that regard. And it's like, I'll let them announce their own stuff. They do have some Xfinity cars left. It's possible they've sold some of the other cars too, by the way. They were just talking about those specific ones.
Yeah, they had
But
62,
still,
right? 62. They sold off 20.
in the 60 area. So yeah. But they retain some of the cars because they want the opportunity that if they decide to go do a one-off race, let's say AJ just really has the itch to, I think Coda would be too early, but another road course later in the year, and they decide, you know what, we have the car, we can have a skeleton crew, let's go run an Xfinity race. They hold on to that option. Doesn't mean that they will, but Trent Owens, Andrew Dickinson, and Mike Cook will all be back with the team next year. That's the two crew chiefs and the technical director of the Cup side. They retained 99% of their employees from switching to Xfinity to trucks and continue to add employees every day. Announcements are coming about the truck crew chiefs and the competition director. It will have its own competition director. Rams leadership is currently at Kaulig I want to call it headquarters, but I guess it's not Kaulig headquarters. That would be in Ohio, the Kaulig Racing facility, as we speak. Cup guys have the week off for the team. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We have the big Chris Rice interview next week. And then, again, an announcement expected in the next, I would say, 48 hours on the Rams show. So our content certainly isn't going to slow down over the course of the next month with that going on. We have a bunch of other interesting things planned as well. Any last thoughts on the Kaulig front, man, before we do some rapid fire and then go to some questions?
Yeah, I think I'm just super excited that Andrew Dickinson's coming back. I know the season didn't end well with Ty Dillon, and yeah, I saw a stat. I love stats. Stats is one of my favorite things. And what I follow a guy who does a lot of different like weekly. If the winner was here, second place would be here, third place would be here, sort of thing on the racetrack. I forgot his handle. I would give him a shout out if I remembered it off the top of my head. But he did an end of season chart where they would say from Daytona to Phoenix and back. The season, the amount of miles they ran, Daytona to Phoenix and back 3 times. And where the respective drivers would be based off median speed. Ty Dillon in that 10 car was the second slowest car in the entire field. The only car they were faster than was Cody Ware. Riley Herbst was faster than the 10 car this year. That's not great. That said, I think Andrew Dickinson is an incredibly good strategist, and he salvaged some finishes when he was with AJ and back in 2024. And honestly, earlier in the year, I think a lot of Ty Dillon's success came from Andrew Dickinson making the right calls at the right time, getting back on the lead lap, flipping a stage or running long, going from 28th to 10th. Right, Andrew Dickinson, I think, is a very talented crew chief, and I'm glad that he's returning. I think that was my big takeaway, that the core engineering brain trust of the organization is coming back. And Mike Cook, I think, was a great add. Again, that 16 car was fast pretty much all season, truthfully. The results weren't there, but it wasn't for lack
Did
of
it say
speed.
where that ranked on the chart? I imagine they would have been around
He
middle
was
of the pack.
AJ in the 16 team was 20th.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought, given how the last 10 races went. Probably would have been 15th before that.
Yeah, so 20th on median speed. That's literally right smack in the middle. So could have been better, but certainly not dead last, which is basically where Ty Dillon in the 10 car was. Which again, I don't want to pick on Ty because I really do like the guy, and he showed a lot of things that I kind of became a fan of his based off this season. The gap in talent is night and day between AJ and Ty, and that's my big things. Like, I have no issues with Ty coming back if he comes back, but he's not going to be a driver that's going to be able to elevate the program. And I don't think Christian Eckes would as a rookie either. But I think the potential is there for Christian Eckes to build a platform. Think of some of the other young drivers. Zane Smith is the one that kind of comes to mind. He struggled, but then has gotten a little better every year. Yeah, I just think that's the platform, and I just don't think Ty Dillon has much room to improve. So we'll see how that plays out. But I am glad Dickinson's coming back, and I do think he is a very integral part of the team's success going forward.
Yeah, me too. I think he's a fit. Although, if I were them, you really don't have anything to lose. I would be flipping them. I really would. I'd give Trent his shot with Ty and Andrew a full season with AJ. That's what I would do. Again, if Ty is the one back in the car, we think he'll be back in some capacity. But we're now into the off season, and the longer this goes, the less likely that feels. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Who knows? We could get some shocker announcement with it, and you just never know these days. All right, let's move on here to the Cup Championship. Can't spend too many times on these topics. These are rapid fire topics. Someone brings it up in the chat, we can spend a little more time. But Kyle Larson wins. Big move on the outside. Danny Hamlin doesn't get it done again. And there was definitely people searching for some very reputable NASCAR reporters searching for some I don't want to call it clickbait headlines because I do think there's something to read into it all, but made it sound like Danny Hamlin's future was far more uncertain than Danny Hamlin said. It was put out there that Hamlin just didn't know if he was going to race again next year. And his actual comment was he can't even think about racing again next year. It's too soon, but he does have a contract. And yeah, I'm sure he's deflated. I'm sure he's deflated as the Toronto Blue Jays feel. That's rough. I expect Danny Hamlin to be back. I will say this though, if he did decide to Carl Edwards it between what's gone on the track and off the track, that would be one hell of a big hole to fill and not much time to fill it, especially if you were anti putting Corey Heim on the same team as your grandson.
Yeah, they would pretty much have no choice on that front if that happens. But listen, I mean, I am a closet Denny Hamlin fan. I have been for years. I'm an underdog person. I always have been. That's why I'm a Cubs fan. That's why I'm an AJ Allmendinger fan. That's why I was a Kyle Petty fan before that. I always root for the underdog. And while Denny Hamlin is the furthest thing from an underdog, he has 60 wins in his career. He's top 10 ever. He doesn't have a championship. And weird circumstances have prevented him from getting one. This one is no different. Like, just soul-crushing defeat. You lead 85%, 90% of the race. You have a 3+ second lead with 3 laps to go. You know, you've done everything right. You put the pieces together. This is the opportunity. And a caution comes out. And they take 4 tires instead of 2. And Kyle Larson gets a great restart. And Denny doesn't. The 22 kind of blocks him. Devastating. I don't think you can even describe it. I didn't want to watch racing for a couple days after that. I was that worked up about it. So I know he'll be back. There's no doubt. He's too good. He's still way too fast. And as he said, he's got a contract for 2 more years at JGR. They just signed Progressive, which is a massive sponsor. In fact, I went out and bought a Progressive diecast today because I was feeling salty about it. He'll be back.
I love that car. I love the look of that car.
I do too. It's a great looking car. It's clean, not overly dramatic. It's just pretty. Showing up on my shelf behind me shortly.
I will stand by what I said. I wish he would have went and drove for his own team. I don't see how that would have ruined the Joe Gibbs alliance if they're still having to pay out the ass for it, which I believe they are. Maybe he gets a little bit of a haircut because he's a big-time driver for the team, but I would like to see him, go and run for his own team. That would have been nice. So yeah, that was it for Hamlin. And then on the Xfinity side, Jesse Love comes out of nowhere and does what NASCAR was probably hoping didn't happen and wins in the one race shootout, despite Connor Zilisch being miles ahead of everybody this year.
Yeah, that's tough. Again, tough pill to swallow. Zilisch won 10 races, would have won the championship last, even had the format not changed and they were just going off points, he would have clinched the championship in a 3-race format in Martinsville. He had that big of a cushion. It's insane. That said, Jesse Love was the best car on Saturday. He earned it. Like, I'm much more okay with Jesse Love winning a championship on Saturday than I am Kyle Larson winning it on Sunday. Because Kyle Larson didn't lead a single lap and was at best a 6th place car and yet managed to win a title. Whereas at least Jesse Love, he pretty much dominated the second half of that race. I do feel bad for Zilisch. He was a very deserving champion. And the byproduct of that quickly, of him not winning the championship, he did not earn enough super license points to go run hypercars in the offseason, which is some booty. And a gold-rated IMSA driver has won a Rolex 24 has 10 plus wins this season alone in Xfinity, and he hasn't earned the privilege of racing a supercar is some
That's wild.
bullshit to me, frankly.
Yeah, that's fucked.
But because he didn't win the title, he needed to win the title to earn enough points. So the system screwed him. And I will say this, Connor Zilic, like him, hate him, he is the next big brand. He is the future of the sport. He is going to dominate for years and years. I have no doubt. He is the face of the franchise that they need to make sure when he wants to go race in Europe, he's racing in Europe. When he wants to run the Indy 500, he's running the Indy 500. NASCAR needs to send Connor Zilic out everywhere they can. And this was a missed opportunity because of the stupid ass system in place. So I'm glad they're changing it. This is one of many times that stuff like this has happened, that this convoluted one race championship has really cost a future star of our sport an opportunity to go show Europe what's up. And trust me, Europeans are cocky sons of bitches, and they need to be put in their place.
Well, I don't know if I'll go that far, sir. But especially as a Blue Jays fan who just lost to the Dodgers. But yeah, I look at the end of the day, Connor Zilish will go as far as Trackhouse will allow him to go. He's not going to be going up against Xfinity competition. He's going up against Cup competition, and he's yet to show he can do what SVG does on the Cup side of the road courses. And I don't think he's going to have any advantage on the ovals in the Cup Series. I expect Connor Zilish to run very much similar to what Ty Gibbs is doing, is what I would compare it to. Someone who's competitive, may challenge for a win here and there, but he's not going to come up and dominate. I don't believe that for a single second. Had he been in some better equipment, Joe Gibbs Racing, Hendrick, etc., maybe, but I haven't seen enough out of Trackhouse, not named SVG, the last 2 years to go. Yeah, this guy's going to be able to go out there and do some damage.
Yeah, he's going to Kyle Larson it. He's going to win some races that his talent is going to allow him to win racing in Trackhouse equipment. He'll run in Trackhouse equipment for, let's call it 5 years or so. And then he's going to get an opportunity to go to a big brand. Joe Gibbs Racing, when Denny Hamlin hangs it up, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they make a big push to get Connor Zilic in that car. Yeah, you're absolutely right. While he's racing for Trackhouse, he is going to be limited by that equipment. But it won't be long before he's racing in top flight equipment. He is too good, too talented. He's going to get poached. I'm pretty confident in that. So we'll see how it plays out. In the short term, he'll do the best he can. He's still a rookie. You're absolutely right. It doesn't matter how good you are. I mean, Chase Elliott didn't win for 3 years. Ty Gibbs still hasn't won. Took Ryan Blaney 2.5 years. It doesn't matter. The best of the best take time, even in the Cup Series. I don't expect Zilic to go out there and win next year at all, to be honest. It'll take him a few years. But when it clicks, it's going to click in a big way for him.
Yeah, time will tell. And then, like you and I predicted, man, I don't think we predicted how it would go down, but Corey Heim wins the truck championship, and deservedly so with the season he had.
Hey, 12th to 1st in one corner. That's what we were hoping Hamlin, at least that's what I was hoping Hamlin would do on Sunday. Didn't quite work out the same, but that, again, won both stages, won 12 races, 13 races, I think, at the end. By far the most deserving champion in the sport. And had he not won the championship because he also took 4 tires, I mean, we'd be having a real, even more so than we already are. I'm glad he got it done. He certainly is a deserving champion.
That moment you look down at your phone and it's at 1%. Just got it plugged in. My phone might die. If it does, I'll be back. You might have to carry it for a few minutes. We're getting ready to wrap up in the next 15 probably. All right, so SVG dude struggled early on. I was looking at the detailed stats because we're planning a little bit of a video series. I've been taking notes on that. And about halfway through the playoffs, it felt like something clicked for him on some ovals, and he started running better on all types of ovals, really. Was very good. He ended up finishing the season with 11 top 15s. Um, Now, 5 of them are dominating wins on road courses, but uh, still, that's not bad. And a few of them coming towards the end of the year. I think that is the pathway to SVG's success moving forward. It's one thing when you're running 25th to 30th on ovals like he was for a good chunk of the first half of the season and then winning on road courses. It's another thing when you're starting to race your way into the top 15 on a consistent basis. Now, he had some stuff come up that prevented him from finishing in the top 15, but on his own raw speed, he was being able to go and race up there in the top 15. And to me, once you start doing that, plus you have the massive advantage he has on road courses, that's a bit of a game changer.
For sure. I think his biggest enemy going forward is just going to be consistency. But he has shown that he can run pretty, not just up front, but be the best trackhouse car. He outran Ross multiple weeks here down the stretch. Very impressive stuff he was able to do, especially at the mile and a halfs. I hate to call them cookie cutters, but you see more of those than anything else. It seemed like he's starting to grasp how to manipulate the air. We saw him running the high line, right around the fence, ripping the fence, finding some speed. He is a bold driver. Going back to some of what we've spoken to his fans, what we've seen in videos, he has no for sure, and he's willing to stick his car in places that others might not be comfortable doing so, and it's working for him. He found speed. But consistency is where it's going to be at. Like, can he do that week in, week out, not make mistakes, not get in the hornet's nest and overreact or overcorrect? I think if he can figure that out and build off that, and you said 15 of them this year, is that what you said? 15 top
11.
15s, 11 top 15. That's not bad. That's like basically a third of the season. If he can take that 11 and turn it into 20, that's a huge gain for him. And I have no doubt that he can do it. That said, tracks like Phoenix, he was not very good at Phoenix last Sunday. Pocono, Indianapolis, Michigan, some of the less, conventional tracks on the circuit. We'll see. I think that's where he needs to improve still. And if he can take that leap, watch out. He's going to have a legitimate shot to make some runs. He's obviously the best road course racer ever at this point. He'll win some races, build some, just like this year, he had a nice, pretty comfortable bank of playoff points. If he can take some of that consistency and maybe win a stage or two on an oval, maybe even figure out a way to finish top 10, top 15 in points in the regular season, I don't question his ability to do it. I don't know if he'll quite get there next year, but he's certainly well on the pathway is pretty clear for him at this point. He's made big gains, and I was really impressed by it.
Yeah, and you got to start somewhere, right? And he's shown gains not just on obviously the road courses, but he's starting to get used to the ovals, and I'm still not convinced he's ever going to be challenging for wins on ovals outside of super speedways, but you don't have to, as we've talked about. Might not be a one race playoff, but I'm pretty convinced that they're not going to go back to 36 race season. So being effective and making the chase, and then being able to run good on ovals when they come up is going to be important. You can't just live off of road course dominance in NASCAR. So
yeah,
you're
and
in
listen,
the current system.
and I'll say this: like, I'm not expecting a week, this to be a weekly occurrence, but using AJ as a reference, he dominated a couple Dover races. He dominated a Phoenix race. Like, he had, he almost won Martinsville a few years, early on, and when he was driving for Penske. I do think SVG will have that occasional race where he figures it out and puts himself in a position to win an oval. Whether he does or doesn't, I don't know. But I do think he'll have some opportunities, especially if if he continues to do this for the next 5 to 10 years. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins oval at some point in his career.
Well, time will tell where we go with that. We'll say some topics for the next show. We'll talk about the point standings on the next episode. This is your final chance to get any questions and/or comments in on today's show. Feel free to do so. Whatever you want to talk about, the floor is yours. We're going to go back here in the comment section and address some things that we didn't have time to address earlier. Ryan, if I'm repeating anything, let me know because we're an hour and a half into this thing. I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, I mean AJ's doing all right. Listen, one thing we know about AJ is he is a very emotional driver. That's his kryptonite and his strengths. And even though he was pretty adamant that he had had enough at the end of his race at Phoenix, Chris Rice talked to him on the phone. He's doing all right. He was out golfing this week. He's not too sore. So I think the end of the season wears on everyone, and wrecking 3 times hard, three races in a row, basically. But he's doing okay. He'll be fine. He'll be ready to go for Daytona next year. In fact, he's running the Rolex in January, which is super exciting. Like, he hasn't done that since 2020, and I love starting the racing season with the Rolex 24, and I'm excited that he's going to be driving for Meyershank Racing again this year. So looking forward to the next handful of years. AJ still got 4 years on his contract. He's not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I think he wrecked 4 times in the last 3 weeks, which is just wild when you include the practice one as well. So, not how you want to end things. We addressed the potential Hall of Fame driver, the Kaulig Ram All-Star truck. We think basically has to be run by some retired drivers. Names we brought up were Ryan Newman, Tony Stewart, Casey Kane, Clint Boyer, Kevin Harvick, Greg Biffle, Carl Edwards, guys like that. Maybe even Kurt Busch, right? So, I mean, he's got a history with Dodge. So, I know he has a position at 2311, but I don't think his position would prohibit him from driving. But medically, he might not be able to go.
Yeah.
Queen, Guy, Haley, who are the other two? Any chance Hammer comes back? He was a name that sounds like was considered. He was a name that that was told to us on a short list with Enfinger, and doesn't appear that either one of them came out. And honestly, if I'm choosing between Hemrick, Enfinger, and Haley, I'm going Haley.
100%. I love Haley. Hemrick is a consistent. He's fine. I like Hemrick. And Enfinger is a contender year in and year out in the Truck Series, but he's also 40 or 41 years old. He would be a stabilizer for the team, but not a future. So I'm glad it's Haley. No, not that we know of. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be any female drivers taking part of the Gong Show. We don't know who's driving in the Gong Show. So I guess it's possible that we could get a female driver participating and potentially winning. But it's not going to be a Tony B or Chris. What is it? Decker. I forgot her name. We're not going to see a model hopping into the car based off sponsorship or looks. If it is, it's because they earned it during the Gong Show.
All right. We have Mr. Corvette, who wants Mr. Huffman to win. I can see why. Probably a good candidate too, as well. Where are we here? Sorry, the software is giving me some issues. Whoever wins this will race full-time, right? Or will it be part-time? We don't know the answer to that. Could be 2 people in part-time or 1 person full-time. We really don't know. Thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think you got it right. It just kind of depends on how the show. Once we know how the show is going to be structured, I think we'll have a better idea of the answer to this question. I would lean towards a full-time drive, but it could definitely be split.
Is there still talk of Cletus doing a few races? I will say this. I never once heard anybody reputable put Cletus's name out there for Ram. And it's not a name that we ever heard with our sources. It just isn't. Wish I could tell you it was, but never one that we heard.
Agreed. I don't see Cletus having an opportunity. Listen, I enjoy his videos. I enjoyed what he did in the ARCA series. He did not embarrass himself, but he's not ready, and I don't know if he ever will be ready. I don't think it's Cletus at all.
Jesse Love would be a hell of a ad for Legacy, but I wouldn't rule out staying with RCR at this point.
And he did sign an extension for next year with RCR. Legacy did purchase the third charter. That is a fact at this point. They are leasing it to Rick Ware for this upcoming season based off of the agreements already in place. I could potentially see Jesse Love getting the opportunity in 2027, but truthfully, that seat with the Legacy Motor Club will, without a doubt, be Corey Himes in my eyes. I think that's a no-brainer there.
Brock says both of SVG's runs at Phoenix have been similar, though he did improve his finish at the end. Yeah, when he returns to the same place twice, he typically is showing improvement, which is to be expected, and good on him. Lisa says good show. Well, we appreciate it. You guys and gals came out here and a considerable amount of time doing this. We got 180 people watching over on X. It would really mean a lot if you pulled open your YouTube app, went to Kaulignation, and subscribed to the channel and liked the stream and or other videos. We'll be doing some other content in the off season. Kaulig will be happening weekly. Remen is Racing will happen most Wednesdays at around 9:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll come on here now as we get into the off season. I doubt we will be doing 90-minute shows unless there's topics to warrant it. Don't be surprised if they're closer to 40, 45 minutes. But we also have some NASCAR 25 stuff coming down the pipeline as well, and a bunch of other things. But it sounds like Kaulig is going to continue to keep us busy over the course of the next month. But yes, again, big thank you to everybody on X who came out for our first X stream. We are live over on YouTube at Kaulignation. Please check out the channel and subscribe. If you haven't yet, like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications to all to keep with everything we are doing for bonus content. You can check us out at Patreon, patreon.com/Kaulignation. We would appreciate the support over there. It goes a long way. Here's some of our socials that you can find us at right there. Ryan, closing thoughts, man?
Tell you what, it's I think shaping up to be a very exciting off season with a lot of dominoes still to fall into place. I think it's going to be as a Kaulig fan, as a fan of AJ, as a fan of NASCAR in general, I am very excited for the next 2026 season. Things could look a lot different. This court case is coming up. We didn't touch on that tonight, but the several of rulings came in favor of the teams over the last week. That could really reshape how this whole thing looks. It might even reshape how the charters look. But that aside, it's just going to be a really exciting off season, and I can't wait to get drilled down into these last little bits of what Kaulig is planning for the future, and honestly, what the future of NASCAR looks like. Because when we show up in Daytona in February, it could be very, very different landscape. And as a diehard racing fan, that simultaneously excites me and scares me. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I would strongly suggest paying attention to Kaulig socials over the next 48 hours. A lot is going to come from them. Might even get some stuff from us. And yeah, big thank you to everybody who came out and had fun with us tonight. We know for some of you across the pond, it's bright and early. And for a lot of you that came for the Kaulig and the Ram Talk tonight, we really appreciate you. And again, you can catch us weekly right here on the Ramen is Racing podcast live on Kaulignation. Shout out to our channel sponsors one more time. Lynn over at SVGNation on Facebook. Alex over at Dingernation on Facebook. Shout out to our patrons that support us for the bonus content that goes out there. We will get a new episode of the Kaulig and Trackhouse Nation podcast out next week. There is some Trackhouse stuff to talk about that's gone on recently, so you won't want to miss that. And just stay tuned to the channel for more videos in the near future. That's going to do it for us, though, and we will see each and every one of you in the next video.